let's actually look at a basic rule. So a basic rule will contain a couple of different things, but really the main thing it will contain is an operator. So I mentioned, it's Boolean, meaning it's true or it's false. So an operator will describe the type of comparison we want to do. So here in the one that's on screen, the operator is the path is not a file path, but really it's a path within the event that I showed earlier in the JSON. And I'll show you what that looks like. And then a value. So in this case, what I'm saying is I want this rule to compare the value that's in my event file path to the value c:\evil.exe. So if we go back to that event that we had earlier, the path is really as if you're starting at the root of the JSON. So at the very beginning of the JSON, you say, okay, I want to take at the first level the event, and then I want to go in and look for the file path. So in this case, the rule would compare this line with evil.exe. So that's kind of the way a path works. The paths you'll see are very, very common structure used because usually DNR rule wants to get something from the event and compare it to something else. So that's at the most basic value. The operator in this case is doing a straight equal comparison. Now, there's a bunch of different operators that are available to DNR rules. If you go look at our doc, we list all of them, kind of how they work, but it goes from the very simple like is, which is the equality, to starts with, ends with, is greater than, for kind of basic comparisons. But then we can go into further logic like a lookup operator, which will look up, again, it's kind of like that IOC thing that we mentioned, look up a value within a list. You'll see what that looks like. So that's the simplest possible rule we can create. And that rule, if it's evaluated, returns true or false. If it returns true, that's a match. And then the action part of our rule will kick in and it will do whatever is in there. There's a few common things that you can add to a rule that are very common and you'll see very often. They're the example here. The first one is the event. You can specify an event and say, in this case, I'm saying, I don't want to evaluate this rule against all the telemetry coming back from an agent. Really, this only applies to a new process. So I'm saying the event you process. And this is used to make your rules more efficient, faster, and also just more correct. That way, you won't, by mistake, kind of see a match in something that's not expected. You can also do something like events. So in this case, we're saying there's multiple events that I'm interested in having this rule. And you can see that it's the new process and the DNS request. So all of this that you're seeing is called YAML. So YAML, I think, stands for, if I recall, yet another markup language. It's just a simple, readable way to generate well-structured information, data. There's a very basic concept. I'll just mention it in case you're not super familiar with it. But essentially, you're mainly talking about key values. So in this case, op is a key, is the value, and lists. So you see here that we have an events key, and then we have a list of values underneath. So that's a structure you'll see recurring with sometimes lists, sometimes values for various keys. The other common one is the not key, which is saying, I want to try to match this rule, but I want to invert the match. So if it matched, then I want to count it as a non-match, and if it didn't match, then I will report it as a match. So you'll see that it's useful sometimes in more complex rules to invert various parts of a rule. Finally, the case sensitive, which is saying, by default, we are case sensitive. Various uppercase, lowercase will matter. So if you put case sensitive false, you're saying that, for example, the value in the file path, even if it's, evil with a capital E, it should still match, because we don't want to consider case sensitivity.